I just wanted to welcome everybody to the church in April, and we're so pleased to have Linda K. Alpern and Jeremy Dennis speaking this morning about their wonderful works in the show. I mean, they're both real anchors for the show and have incited a lot of curiosity and attention, and I'm really glad that you're here. And I've known Linda's photographs for a long time, and when Eric and I first saw them, we were like so intrigued, like, who is this person? So before we met, so you're the greatest. All right, go ahead, take it away.
Thank you. Oh, well, thank you, church, Eric, April, Sarah, Cecilia, every person that makes this church come together. It's an honor to be hanging with all these artists, and I am mainly a portrait photographer and / registered nurse. So I worked at photography for the past 30 years, and I mainly shoot black and white. And I shot with my Rolleiflex, which is film. So this was a photograph that I had started a water series of portraits of different people. So this particular person had a swimming pool that was very isolated, and it was black. And I had spent a lot of time over at her house, doing all kinds of things over there. It was fun. It was like a party house. But one day I turned to her and I said, would you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and call me when the water turns into a sheet of glass? She was like, yes, definitely. Plus I had already mylar'd her, which was a distorted mirror reflective portraits. So then I went to water to calm things down and yet keep it a little abstract. And she called me at 6 in the morning and said, get over here. The water is totally a sheet of glass. And the filter was off. So I get over there, and you can guess how old she is. And she comes out in a long Indian robe, all hand embroidered, exquisite. And I said, what's underneath that? Because she knew I was going to put her in the water. And she had a negligee on. And I said, would you go in the water like that? And she said, absolutely. And she went in the water. And that was it. It was 12 photographs. And this particular person I'm very proud of, because she has it hanging in her house in New York. So does anybody have an idea how old this person is?
She's over 65, 70.
Yeah. Somebody asked me if it was me.
Yeah.
If I put a tripod up and then had a self-timer on it, and if I took a photograph of myself. So then I photographed different people. People offered me their swimming pools. And I sort of seeked out pools. I originally wanted to photograph Eric and April in the water together a long time ago. No, but I was like, I had photographed a lot of artists also in the water. So but after that, everything sort of flowed more in an organic way. When I photographed people, it just happened. And that's pretty much the way I photograph. I see something and I want to photograph you. And it doesn't matter what you're wearing. I just feel you. And so I've shot all these years with a Rolleiflex. And now I'm doing some more digital work because I was sort of arrogant about, no, I'm never going to shoot not a film. I've got to shoot film. And then I started seeing again what you can do with digital. And now I'm also painting more, but I'm a photographer. I'm a portrait photographer. And what else can I tell you about myself? I see a lot of faces in here. Eight.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you were working on a series of people and water. So what does water and the body mean to you? Like, as a metaphor or whatever? Or, I don't mean to be, that sounds leading, like a leading question. What do you think is the metaphor? I'm just wondering, like, why water and how do you think that happened?
Water has always been a part of my life. You know, I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, was always around swimming pools, was always skinny dipping. It's sexual, it's fluid, it went from a mirror to more organic. And it just naturally flowed for me to do portraits in water. It's calming, isn't it? I mean, water, everybody wants to go and look at the water every day of their life out here. So I seeked out glass water. So at every different time of the day, we have like a reflection. And I did a lot of reflections. I did reflections in Mylar, I did reflections in water, I did mirror reflections of people, like double mirrors. So, you know, I'm a little calmer now.
How do you feel that people interpret it as an Ophelia-like image of someone having drowned or on the verge of, or, you know,
Or death,
submitting
yes,
to-
exactly. Love it. Love that interpretation. Absolutely. I mean, people can interpret everybody's art in a different way. I mean, the more, I was always taught, if more controversial it is, the better. Because if a person walks up and says, oh, that's nice, and they walk by. But you got, you know, make a reaction. Otherwise, so.
I guess I was asking that because you said you were looking for the black water, which seems significant to me, like that you wanted the body to sort of be in it, but also disassociated from it. Because obviously it's a white person in a black pool, so there's that kind of edge to it.
Yeah. But, yeah.
Linda, speaking of edges, did you crop that a lot? Did you play around with, or did you just?
Even back then, I was opposed to cropping.
Oh, wait, wasn't cropping
I mean, I've got a lot of new work that I still shoot with the Rolleiflex, and now I'm not opposed to cropping. I mean, of course, if something is going to fall out, I'm not opposed to cropping. To make it work. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know this may seem slightly off, but it's not. I don't think everything is water, related to water. Would you be willing to say anything about the relationship for you between your work as a nurse, as a health caregiver, and your photography?
Oh, wow. I wish I could understand that, you know, because as a registered nurse, I sure did walk in and out of different situations that you didn't know what you were walking into. You know, I did photograph. I photographed Chuck close to the swimming pool, and that was, you know, he was very supportive on whatever I did. So one day I was telling Eric before I came, because I was showing him a book, and I walked in the afternoon, and there Chuck was in the swimming pool by himself. And back then, Chuck could get out of his wheelchair by himself and slip out, which would make me have I'd be like, oh my God, he was less. He wasn't as large. And I walked in, and the filter was off, and the line around his face made the perfect up close. And so I turned to Chuck and I said, Chuck, you can't believe what's going on with your face. It's magnificent. You've got a line, you've got a mask. He said, well, do you have your camera? I was like, I do. It's in the car. He goes, well, go get it. And I did carry the Rolleiflex everywhere I went. It was just, when you're in your zone, I was lucky. And I ran in and I photographed him. I did 3 photographs and that was it. And he loved it. He loved the photograph of himself. And then I did about 20 other portraits, not of him, in the water, of different people. And I did nudes, but never to exploit women. It was just about the form of water and the beauty of water, what it does with Jane.
Since you're a portrait artist, I was wondering, you said you shot 12 photos here. Did you include her face in any of those?
Yes.
I mean, I think it's very powerful without. Just curious.
And this person was also Mylard. She agreed to have the mirror put up and take a picture of, whatever I saw in the mirror.
Hi, I'm a big admirer of your street art portraits.
Oh, thank
Your
you.
street portraits, and I think you started taking them early, in the 80s or before then.
Maybe in the early 90s.
Oh, in the early 90s. So, can you talk about the difference in portraiture between cool portraiture and street portraiture?
I don't really call myself a street photographer because I always have contact with all the people I photograph. It's rare that I take a photograph over there and that person doesn't know it. So even on the street, I will walk up to that person and say, may I take your photograph? Plus, if I have the Rolleiflex, I want to have that intimacy with the person, where everybody now is a photographer, and everybody's great photography. Everybody's got an iPhone, you can't get a better camera now. But it's a different intention. So when I do street photography, I always make contact. And the scariest thing I did, I was feeling really cut off at one point. And I was in New York, and I was going to Mary Ellen Bartley's opening. And all of a sudden, I walked by somebody, and there was police, and there was a guy there, and he had no legs. And he was balancing on his hips. And he had a mask on. I was like, no, don't do it. You're not going to start doing this kind of photography. So I walked by, and I had the Rolleiflex, turned back, I walked up to him, pulled my camera out, and he smiled, and it brought him joy. And I said, may I take your photograph? I took it, I developed it, and I was shaking for 3 days. Because it was very emotional to do something, because it's all about me. You wouldn't know it, but it always is. Jennifer.
Linda, I just wondered, you said I know you are a registered nurse and a photographer. So you said you've been taking pictures for 30 years.
Yeah.
So how did it happen? Did you study it? Are you self-taught? What inspired you?
When I was in nursing school, my roommates, and when I was a child, I was always my artist. Always. If I wasn't in flower gardens, I was finding the finest fabrics, and shopping or whatever. And when I went to nursing school, all of my roommates were artists. So they were painters, one was a photographer, and I also fell in love with a photographer. He died. So I was so fortunate to be able to express myself the whole time being a nurse. And I also had a few artists that I worked for that really kept me going and told me, do not ride their coattails, to keep going. And then I went to the American Academy of Rome, which was as a visiting artist. And then I got a one-woman show at Guild Hall because of a photograph that I had taken at the Academy. I didn't frame the show, which almost gave Guild Hall a nervous breakdown. And again, some artist told me, do not frame that show. You can't afford it. He said, push pin it. He said, go up to the Museum of Modern Art and go see pieces, how they push pin them. He goes, and where are you going to put all the frames? So it was always about the image. And that's how I was trained. And nursing, I was lucky. I kept my work going and I kept more confidence going. And then Glenn Horowitz gave me a one-woman show. But I did struggle. I did struggle confidence-wise as a nurse because I never thought anybody would recognize me as an artist. So I was told, don't do anything commercially. Don't try to do weddings. I'd love to do weddings, you know, but I probably make them too strong and put in your face too much. Like Larry Fink. But I'm so happy I did because I think it saved me. And then being creative as a nurse.
Could you talk a little bit about your experience at the American Gallery in Rome?
Fabulous.
I'm sure.
Best thing I ever did. I went there, I didn't apply for a fellowship because I was also advised chances of me getting a fellowship were, 1 in a million. But I applied as a visiting artist and it was one of the best experiences. I think, sounding almost there, I have to contact her at the time. I didn't know her at the time, but I went there for a month and any artist can go there. Just apply and you sit and you don't have to even work. You don't have to work on your art. You can just go all over Rome. But everybody is there from all walks of life and you get to talk to people and have dinner with different people and see different people's works. It's a great experience. But it was in the beginning and then I was pushed like, no, you need to do that, And I was a nurse, but I didn't tell anybody at the academy I was a nurse. The last thing I wanted them to do was to ask me questions. And plus, I saw all this art on the wall, people I knew, and I was like, so it was a great experience. I have to go back, actually. Yeah.
I have a comment. Have you seen that Columbia Presbyterian has recently made a art exhibit of what the nurses, the outline they got during the COVID?
I sure did. I saw that again this morning about it, and it was great. I mean, a little something that happened to me before COVID, I actually got a book agent. I wanted to interview registered nurses my whole life, and I've said it way back when I was nursing. I wanted, because nobody knows what it's like to be a nurse. Nobody. The news, they just give you bits and pieces of it. So before COVID, I actually got a book agent. And of course, I can't do computer work, so I actually had a person help me write it all up. I went and interviewed 30 different nurses from all walks of life. I drove up the island, down the island. I was ADD. Now I just want to do Southampton Hospital. I realize they're right there, and then COVID broke out, and I had to stop. But the nurse, even when I went for a procedure at the hospital, they all knew me, and I was like, asking them questions. So a nurse can talk to another nurse, like an artist and a photographer. They were so wonderful. So I don't know what's going to happen to that project, but everything is transcribed. I would love to continue that project. For the Hamptons, though, not drive up to Stony Brook like the way I did. I mean, I wanted male nurses, I wanted old nurses. There's an RN, Evans, who lives next door to me. She's 97 years old. She grew up in that house. There's been articles on her, and she's still licensed. I mean, and the house is still in the original. It's the original. So I've talked, she was interviewed. Yes, Eric? Did you just scratching your back?
No. It seems like now would be the perfect time to do that book.
Now is the time to do the book.
Stories of the nursing dealing with the COVID crisis and the stress and the PTSD and all of that.
Absolutely.
You made, or were you imagining it as a portrait and
Well, I'll tell you the truth, as much as I love doing portrait photography, and I really love, when I connect with a person, I just want to photograph them, the portraits I took of those nurses were terrible. They were terrible. I mean, I know how to photograph. I mean, I know how to get people's...
Why was that?
I think it was, I was so absorbed in their stories, and it was so journalistic for me that I needed to connect with them, you know, so I only got a couple of photographs that were me and that person, and the rest of them, all of you could have taken photographs, you know, so they would all be recontacted to be rephotographed. But yeah, I have to deal with the director of nursing at Southampton Hospital. She was very stressed at the time. And now, I want to do the nurses at Southampton. I live here. I know what they do, you know. So yeah.
Were they digital?
Pardon me?
Did you do digital work for the nurses, or did you use your Rolleiflex film?
A little bit of snapping, and it was great with the cell phone. Maybe they were even better. But after I heard their stories, you know, it wasn't, I have to go back. I just would have to go back. I would have to do it. I just know my photographs. And they're intense. I mean, I've taken people who's had a liver transplant, which got published, thank goodness, and it was a sewing machine. And this was a person who I had done a house call on, and you know, they were great. I mean, I only photograph my life and who captivates me. Am I rambling? Are you all getting tired? Okay, because Jeremy.
I think if I remember correctly, I may have misinterpreted, but when you were doing that book, you had this, you know, there was an agent. There was something that was getting between you, maybe not just the stories or anything. It was this idea that it was going to be a book. Maybe a book has to look a certain way. So I think you weren't as free, or you didn't think you were as free. I mean, that's the impression I got when I spoke to you.
Right, I've done many, many books now of my own work, but when you do a book, and the people who have published in this room know what it takes to do a book, it's a lot of work, and the agent has to sell the book to the publisher, and you've got to have everything perfect, you know, so again, I need an assistant. Bad. How did you get so disorganized is the name of my new book.
You were too busy being creative.
If you could talk about photographers that have inspired and influenced you.
Good question. Well, you know, I like Helen Levitt a lot. I think she was a great photographer. I loved her children's photographs. She's one of my favorite photographers. And
When you mentioned Mylar, I thought you might also like Cortege.
love Cortege. In fact, yeah, I love Cortege. The portrait's the best. And you know what? When I did Mylar, I didn't think of Cortege, and I didn't think of Ouija. It all happened organically. And Ted Davies, who lived in Lansing now, he liked my portraits, and he had a dark room, and he asked me to come over, and he said, I think you're gonna like this material. And he pulls out this sheet of flexible Mylar. And I went to everybody's studio, from Robert Miller, who was the owner of Robert Miller Gallery. He was like Mylar. Everybody let me Mylar them. But they didn't know quite how that they were going to turn out, right? So the more distortion there was, the better the portrait. Larry Rivers, I have stories up to kazoo. So, but everybody was really into it. And I was fortunate, except Dan Flavin. But I got good portraits of Dan. I have formal portraits of him. There's a lot of plugging of people. Yes.
I have one more question.
Good.
So I can't help thinking, when you're a nurse, you're taking care of a vulnerable person. Most of the photographs that I've ever seen you take feel like you're looking at someone in a state of vulnerability. I'm wondering if you're photographing other nurses, if they're not right, because they're not deeply a part of your kind of intuitive, natural subject matter, if that's not too...
No, I think I think you're absolutely right, about that. And any patient, let's say I photographed a patient, they got it, they understood me. It was a relationship between me and and they knew I was a photographer. They thought that was interesting too, to have a nurse, and then I'd say, no, this is what I do. The nurses, I could do it now. I think I could photograph the nurses now because it was crazy pre-COVID. And I'd watch TV and I'd go, are you kidding me? You don't know what's going on. And plus, I'll tell you one thing. They were recruiting nurses who had experience for either 1 or 2 years, paying them $5,000 a week and bringing them in. You kind of want to have an experienced nurse if you're intubated, So they were in a panic to get everybody. They probably would have taken me, but, and I might have done it, but.
We have time for one more question.
Oh, yeah, I'm surprised that wasn't cut off. Sorry, Jeremy. Yes.
I just had a question getting back to that image and your relationship to water. If the weightlessness of human body in water, in the sense that you're 90% water, that kind of, is that something that...
I don't think I intellectualized it as much, I think water is just been part of my life, and I see things in water. You see trees in water, you see flowers, so I used water as my backdrop because it was the closest thing to the clarity that you could get. Now the iPhone, you can make black look black, but you just can't get the same thing with film as you can with digital. And water to me, I had a lot of fun in water growing up as a child. A lot of things happened in the water. It's just, and I used it for portraiture. I'll probably always use water. Any other questions? Did I answer your questions?
You did.
Okay.